Greetings and welcome to the Your Positive Lens podcast, where we hope to adjust your focus so you see that members of your local law enforcement community are not much different than you and me. I'm your host, Scott T., and this is episode 1, Selfless Acts to Save a Life. If you recall from our introduction episodes, we talked a lot about how law enforcement officers manage many of the same day chores, joys of life, and challenges of life, just like you and me. Well, in today's episode, we will be sharing several positive law enforcement news stories that may bring a tear to your eye or make you proud of the men and women that serve your community. You will not believe how amazing and awesome a couple of these stories are. So let's get started. How many of you have ever been on a road trip, driving to work, and thought to yourself, I have enough gas to get there, no problem. I even might have enough gas to get back home. Or you relied on the gauge that told you the number of miles to empty, but never actually checked the gas gauge itself. I bet there are thousands of you who have done this, myself included, and probably heard a few tongue lashings from my wife for doing it. Recently, a gentleman was driving in the Peach State, also known as Georgia, where he experienced this same fate. But he did not just become stranded. He became stranded in a worse situation, blocking the turn lane. How many times have you been upset when a car stalls or breaks down in a turn lane? Safe to say, always. There never is a real good path to get around someone blocking your turn lane. Fortunately for this gentleman, Sergeant Bowden of the Cobb County Sheriff's Office happened to be in the area and rolled up on the scene. He learned not only was this gentleman out of gas, but that he also didn't have anyone to call for help. So what did Sergeant Bowden do? He drove to the gas station, filled up a gas can with a few gallons of gas, came back, and filled the tank. Once the car got started, Sergeant Bowden wasn't done. He didn't just leave the scene. He made sure the gentleman knew the location of the nearest gas station so that he could then fill up his tank and continue on the rest of his way. Thank you, Sergeant Bowden of the Cobb County Sheriff's Office, for your care of the community you serve. If running out of gas is not your worry, how about traveling on a highway by yourself and starting to hear that thumping sound? Thump, 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 thump. Or worse, a loud bang. And your vehicle swerves left or right. And you're immediately frantic, trying to prevent your car from crashing. The tire is blown out, or is it just flat? You may or may not have a jack in your car, and probably, like most people, never even check the tire pressure of your spare tire. Well, that may not be the exact scenario of this next story, but a young lady was driving home from college on Interstate 77 and did experience a flat tire. But thanks to the assistance of Trooper Clapper of the Ohio State Highway Patrol, she was able to return home safely after they assisted her with the tire change. Highway Patrol can cover many miles in a day, but assisting a motorist with a flat tire and ensuring their safety can truly happen anywhere. Thank you, Trooper Clapper of the Ohio State Highway Patrol, for assisting this young college student and ensuring she gets home safely. Before we get to the final two positive law enforcement news stories that I am telling you you will not want to miss, I'd like to share a letter of appreciation that was sent to the Baltimore Police Department regarding the work of Officer Boyd, Officer Lawrence, and their partners. The letter reads, Officer Boyd, Officer Lawrence, and another officer on duty were very professional from the beginning of the interaction. They explained everything very professionally and politely from the initial point of contact. I was the supposed perpetrator in the incident, and they never made me feel like the perpetrator nor the victim. They took the time to listen intently and obtain witness information to help corroborate the truth of the matter. They also explained the process that can and may happen after the fact. We 100% need more officers such as them patrolling the streets. This is a fine example of officers listening in the moment, gathering facts, assessing the situation, and clearly and effectively communicating the process. Wonderful work, Officers Boyd and Lawrence, and your partners. Thank you for representing the Baltimore Police Department with class. We're going to take a quick 15-second break, and we will be right back with the final two stories. Again, you are not going to want to miss these two. We'll be right back. I told you it would only be 15 seconds, and I assure you it was worth the wait. If you were to think back to when you were younger or your children were younger, was there ever a toy, sporting equipment, game, or something that you truly treasured? Did you ever lose it? Did someone ever steal it from you? How does that make you feel? Mad, angry, sad, upset, all the above? I'm right there with you. This is exactly what happened to a couple young children in North Carolina. Officer T.J. Smith of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department responded to a larceny call, and upon arriving at the scene, the mother of two young children informed Officer T.J. Smith that her children's bicycles had been stolen. I'm sure many of you remember the days of laying your bike on the ground and running off to play, not even thinking about locking it up. Heck, some of us didn't even have a bike lock to use. We were not even thinking it wouldn't be there when we returned. Or what about the fun times of attaching baseball cards to the spokes to make that wonderful sound as we pedaled as fast as we could around the neighborhood? Who knows how many expensive baseball cards or collector cards we trashed having fun those days as kids. Well, you can imagine how the children must have felt having their bikes stolen. What could Officer T.J. Smith do to help resolve this matter and return a smile to the face of the mom and her children? Find the perpetrators, arrest them, hope they still had the bike? Maybe, but truly not a likely result. So he did something far more amazing. He contacted Toys for Tots, something that we usually don't think about except for at Christmas time, and received 2 bikes for the children who had their bikes stolen. Officer T.J. Smith, now with the assistance from Officer Herrera, dropped the bikes off for the kids. And the smiles they received, well, you can only imagine how bright they were. This is truly a great moment by Officer T.J. Smith and Officer Herrera, a moment that these children will never forget, always remembering the day that you brought happiness and smiles back to their faces with the most kind gesture. Thank you both and your representation of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. I wasn't kidding, guys. I told you, you might hear a story that would bring a tear to your eye. But we're not done yet. If I was to ask 1,000 people, what is one of your biggest fears? I'm not sure what they would say. However, when I have asked people, what would be the worst way to die? I've always heard 2 answers. Do you know what they are? I bet you could guess at least one of them. Probably both, because my guess is they are probably on your list too. Drowning and fire. People will usually say, I hope to die in my sleep, but drowning or in a fire would be horrible. Imagine that is your fear, or you believe those are the worst ways to die. And you find yourself in your vehicle, on fire. The flames are getting hotter and hotter. No one is extinguishing them. The seconds begin to feel like minutes. The minutes begin to feel like hours. And now you realize you're trapped. You cannot get out. Your foot is burning. What do? Think it's over. Say a prayer. Give up or fight like hell to get out. What thoughts would be going through your mind? That's the situation that recently unfolded in Texas. Deputies Reyes and Drummond of the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office found a Ford F-150 in a ditch having struck a culvert. The truck was on fire, flames bursting to near the height of the telephone poles, and the driver was trapped inside. Deputy Reyes' attempts to tame the fire only seemed to anger it. Like the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico fueling a hurricane, the fire continued to grow. In a daring act of courage and selflessness, Deputy Reyes busted the glass of the F-150 and tried to pull the driver to safety, only to encounter another obstacle. While the flames continued to rage, the driver's foot was not only burning up, but it was stuck on the pedals. Deputy Drummond, acting swiftly, and was able to cut the seatbelt so Deputy Reyes could enter the burning vehicle and free the driver's foot that was continuing to burn while it was stuck on the pedals. The deputies ultimately succeeded in extracting the driver from the burning F-150 and carried him to safety, where he was treated by EMS. The prompt and fearless actions and complete disregard for their own safety to truly save the life of the driver is beyond commendable. No words can express my sincerest gratitude for the actions of Deputy Reyes and Deputy Drummond. You have displayed some of the finest actions of a police officer, and the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office is better today because of your actions. Thank you. I told you you did not want to miss these two stories. None of today's stories represent one's stereotypical view of law enforcement. No celebratory interrogation, no glorified arrest, just your positive law enforcement news stories. Some weeks we'll share more stories than others, just as some weeks we'll feature a local Leo in addition to your positive law enforcement news stories. We would love to hear your feedback about today's episode. Head to the comments section and let us know what you think. Your feedback is most valuable in making our show better for you. Continue to share and follow our LinkedIn page for the latest updates, and follow our podcast on Spotify. And continue to share your positive law enforcement news stories, as we hope to adjust your focus so you see that members of your local law enforcement community are not much different than you and me. Thank you to all the officers and departments featured on this episode for their continued dedication to serve our community. Keep those stranded on the road safe, bring smiles to the faces of children, and battling the flames to save a life. Remember, you can always find places that will share negative law enforcement news stories. But here at Your Positive Lens, you'll only find your positive law enforcement news stories. Once again, I'm your host, Scott P. Thanks for listening, and we'll capture you on your next Positive Lens.